Hello everyone, I'm Rob Pardo, the Executive Vice President of Game Design here at Blizzard Entertainment. Diablo III is a game that has been years in the making, and I'm thrilled with how it turned out. The game developers did a truly epic job, and today I'd like to take you on a behind-the-scenes look at how they made Diablo III. Our first stop is with the cinematics team. Over the years, these filmmakers have brought our characters and worlds to life on a level of detail that is not always possible in the game. I'm excited to say that Diablo III's cinematics are some of the most amazing ones ever. Here's some insight from the creators themselves into how these films were made.
Diablo is our darker IP, and it is usually an opportunity for us to do something different than we normally do with our other titles. But to put a spin on it, the Blizzard spin, just enough to make it feel unique is something that's always exciting for us.
It has begun.
Just like the game itself was reinvented a few times over and over, so were the cinematics. Back in 2008, we were working on what we thought was Leah at the time.
We started with the first intro, and we had a Leah that we animated all the way through. We got it done, and then when we started to release the teaser, it turned out we had some problems with Leah, and they needed to basically rebuild her because we had one shot at the end of the teaser where she needed to do a lot of very subtle stuff. So they remodeled her, and we hammered her out in like a week. So that was Leah number 2 at the end of the teaser.
We actually animated an entire different version of the church intro. And we not only did we remake Leah, but we remade that entire cinematic.
When I came onto the show, the idea of this comet Tyrael coming through was always there, right? But how were we telling it was the challenge, right? And trying to set up this relationship with Cain and Leah. In certain character moments, she puts this blanket on his back, and we wanted to show that she's caring for him, yet she's really not listening, right? She's just trying to be herself, and that was really a challenge from an animation standpoint. Just to put the cloth on Cain's back was a struggle, right?
We'll generally render all those elements independently. We'll render Leah by herself. We'll have frames of Cain by himself, and we'll have frames of possibly the blanket by itself. And we'll have to, in our compositing software, we'll layer them appropriately and build a composite. Look at a shot and you count the elements. Look at the major assets that are in there, and then dust particles, and you've got atmosphere. Then you'll have a character, and any one character is probably made up of 15 to 20 layers sometimes. So it adds up pretty quick. It just depends on the shot.
Although it might not feel like a very big moment, it was a very big character moment, and we're really trying to focus on the story. And so those types of things we rally behind. Even though it's very difficult from a production standpoint, I felt that it was very important to describe these characters. So it was something that we pushed forward.
None of this makes any sense to me.
It turns out that an attractive young female is one of the hardest things to do in CG.
The art direction for Leah, I want her to look very pretty, almost like a doll-looking character.
She is one of the very first female characters that we're trying to achieve realism combined with our Blizzard art style.
We're chasing a realism that can make you believe she actually exists.
Having a softer look on the female character is a huge thing for our director.
We've had to throw pretty much the kitchen sink at her to get her to look good in all of our shots.
We finally found like a method that works pretty well is we place area cards around her to really just wrap the lives around her and give her a really dreamy kind of feel. And then it was something that the director looked at it and he was like, wow, this is it.
The close-up shots of Leah are the shots that we were able to really push the bar, raise the look considerably, and get really soft lighting and really great-looking subsurface scattering and skin.
Getting the subsurface qualities, to how the light bounces around underneath the skin, really controlling how big her pores are and where the colors of blood are under her skin and, in the textures.
Her skin quality, I think, is really one of the best things we've ever done here. Not to mention her eyes.
The trick in her eyes is making sure that the reflections are there. It's all about the reflections on the eyes and getting the highlights to be just in the right place, make it look interesting no matter what angle you're shooting from or what the lighting scenario is.
In past, we've treated the eyes as sort of a singular component. This is very different. The eyes have 10 or more components to them, not to mention the textures associated with those to make them look that realistic. Even when we're looking at each other, you can tell your iris goes slightly in, the pupil comes slightly out from that, and without that kind of fine detail, even in 3D, you notice.
I think we put a lot of realism in her eyes, but I also enjoy some of the shots where we see her full body and we see the body mechanics and her facial reactions. Leah was very, very challenging for animation because her model looks realistic. We are always fighting with the uncanny valley.
Many people talk about the uncanny valley, where characters that are 3D sort of approach a sort of human-like quality, and instead of feeling like you're attached to that character, you start to feel uncomfortable with that character.
You're used to seeing humans every day, right? So when you go to see a CG human that's close but not quite right and there's something wrong, it just pulls you out of what you're looking at.
We don't necessarily want to hit reality exactly. We want to film some reference, but abstract reality and come up with a performance that engages the audience but doesn't necessarily try to match exact film, because if we wanted to get perfect reality, we should have just made a short film, probably.
I think that Blizzard has started to crawl out the other side of that uncanny valley, where you have a lovable and great persona in Leah that doesn't really bother you from a CG perspective. Her emotions are on her face. She travels through the cinematic and you know exactly what she's feeling, what she's seeing through her eyes. And you don't feel uncomfortable with her. Her character really seems to stand out. You feel attached to her.
The ancient law of the high heavens strictly forbids us from interfering with the mortal world. Yet you have done so, brazenly.
All I am guilty of, Imperius, is bringing justice, while you hide, cowering behind your throne.
Silence!
Just the wings alone on the angels was incredibly challenging. We wanted to create something that no one had seen before, that was hypnotic to look at, that complemented the angels, right? That kind of delivered on that base expectation, prettier than what we had seen before. But when you start thinking about that and what people imagine heaven to be, it's like, it's difficult to deliver on those.
We have a concept team in cinematics that creates all the concepts related to the cinematic. These guys will do character design, environment design, effect design, color scripting, just touch upon everything that is design work within cinematics.
When we were working on wing development, the first wings that we started were Imperius. We had several examples from the director and art director as to what the wings should look like.
He wanted something that people never seen before. It's kind of like the sun flare. It's a very aggressive look.
When you think of an archangel and you think about him smiting the wicked, it would probably be the most scary thing to behold, beautiful and scary at the same time. We talked a lot about different colors. In the end, I really pushed hard for just this golden god.
He obviously doesn't have a face, so we can't identify with him emotionally from his facial expressions, but his wings are his emotional expression.
It's like a dog's ears. When he's mad, things kind of get brighter, and when they're alert, they go up.
When we finally settled on a concept, we were able to turn that into a 3D element that really sort of sung as it pushes energy from the center of Imperius out to the tips of his wings.
Imperius thankfully had some sort of shape already drawn into the wings. They kind of look like eagle wings, so we came up with an idea to model the rig after a real wing.
Because it looked like a bird wing, we decided to put a bird structure inside the wings. And we could compress and extend the wing like a bird would. And at the same time, if we decided we wanted to make each independent strip break apart from the bird wing, we could do that too. So we needed a wing with an incredible amount of flexibility. So his wings had a lot more research and development than Tyrell's wings did.
Tyrell's wings is relatively easier because just the nature of the design is not nearly as aggressive. It's a very soft, flowy, peaceful-looking wing.
His wings are still essentially a bunch of octopus tentacles, but the difference is we got a little bit more complex with the movement. We drove these procedural sine waves down the wings, radial manner from his back.
It's really hard to animate something that's organic, that's seemingly dynamic, so his are always doing this kind of waving motion. And so we have this controller that basically just puts his wave into it, and then the animators can just kind of put in how much they want.
During parts where Tyrell is calm, we try to keep an even sine wave type of shape going through it. Whenever the things are getting heated up, we try to increase that sine wave and try to make these patterns a little bit more chaotic.
Another layer on top of that is we simulate it with a cloth solver to give it this wavy, lagging feeling. And then once that's done, it goes to effects, and then they put on all the other sparkly stuff and smoke that comes off of it.
Tyrell's wings for the effects department are another big challenge. We've added onto them from the D1 and D2 area. His wings have extended. They've become more like appendages. We also wanted them to have life of their own. And so we've added a whole series of small but subtle effects on top of the wings. Near the tips of the wings, there's actually 5 passes just on the very tips of the wings in order to get them to feel like they're flowing through the environment, almost like a wind blowing on them. And so we needed to spend a long time making sure that there was lots of detail and pushing it into that perspective that we needed.
Heaven is gold and a lot of white and stone. And I mean, it looks like Liberace's palace, right? You know, we really had to be careful with some of this stuff. We wanted people to understand that it's heaven and deliver on some of those expectations, but we also wanted to put our spin on it. And those colors and those palettes, it's just really difficult to work with.
With gold or any metal, you have 2 techniques, you have 2 ways of making it look nice. It's basically all about what it's reflecting.
Imperius, for example, is full of metal, very reflective.
Tons of revision trying to get the correct gold shader for him. It started as a very copper, warm color kind of gold, and it transited into a uber gold, what the director called it. Nick wanted this kind of brush metal look, so we kind of digged into the shader and tried to achieve something like that. So the final version is slightly more desaturated, but it's still very rich in the gold kind of essence.
And also, of course, I have to say about the wings of Imperius, it's a huge light source, which we cannot really, bring into a 3D software or render with that effects together.
How do we get the reflection of his wing to come through on the armor?
It's very expensive to actually calculate the proper reflections of all of those pieces next to each other.
The only thing we could do is kind of create cards and just kind of fake it.
Rather than reflecting all of the different elements, we'll simply texture map it onto a flat plane and then just reflect that flat plane. That makes it go a lot faster. It's a lot cheaper that way.
Like I said, I really felt that just having this golden god present in this space helped see him as the beautiful side, but his actions and what he does are just completely scary. And so he's frustrated at Tyrell, he's frustrated at the council, and in some ways that frustration starts to play out on his own actions. This is how Leah uses his vanity against him, calls him out, picks a fight with him, and basically just wipes the floor with him. To balance that and get the characters to work, right, and really be able to see what's going on with the wings was just this amazing challenge.
The destruction shot at the end of Heaven's Gate is the most complicated destruction shot we've ever attempted at Blizzard Cinematics. We started off with a mere 2,000 very large pieces, and by very large I mean the smallest piece was probably the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, and then broke that down into many hundreds of thousands of pieces, all individually cut. And then on top of that, many millions or billions of particles that are streaming off those pieces in order to make that feel that large. The dust cloud for the Heaven's Gate sequence is the largest atmospheric sim we've ever attempted. It's one of the real reasons that you can feel the scale of those gates.
So there was a conceptor on the Diablo team. His name is Vic. He's an amazing artist, has a very twisted vision, and this particular character, Asmodan, was his creation.
Asmodan, to me, is the most appealing character because he fits into the world that we created, but he isn't, to me, have to walk that tightrope of a line that we had to with Leah in terms of keeping her real. We just had to keep him believable.
The challenge of creating a crab-like character, multiple eyes, a furnace mouth, right, that's going to have talking lines, we had our work cut out for us.
One of the first hurdle was the fact that what was drawn in the storyboards, his proportions were completely opposite what we ended up getting from modeling in the final actual design.
He had very interesting proportions and hit a lot of interesting poses that we couldn't quite reach when we actually started modeling the character out. So when we were building this guy, we had to push him quite a bit in order to reach those.
The storyboards had long torso, long arms, short little legs, and he was doing certain actions, and then we were supposed to do those same actions with a shorter torso, shorter arms, longer legs character.
Some of the moves he had to do, like bending down, punching the floor, which is almost physically impossible. So we have to be able to do that in a convincing way and try our best to cheat sometimes.
We basically had to break and fake the rig. We had to break everything. His whole back end comes off the ground that you don't see because he physically can't do what he's actually doing. The only things touching the ground are like the first 3 legs. And so it was our job to actually make him believable moving without breaking him much.
So on so many levels, he's not a biped, he's this crab character, right? He's got this crazy mouth, he's got multiple eyes, and he's got a huge speaking part.
I was tasked with the challenge of making a character talk who didn't necessarily have lips.
We got creative with that. We realized by rotating parts of the jaw that wouldn't normally rotate, we could achieve some of the shapes that you would think would be what the lips could make.
Creating mouth shapes that would create certain sounds. It was like trying to animate the predator talking.
So we just tried the best we could with what we had. And sometimes with creative limitations, you come up with some great stuff.
I defy you.
It was a lot of late nights getting him to where we got him, and it's really exciting to see his character come to the screen. We thought long and hard about what Diablo would look like. Would Diablo be the Diablo from Diablo II? Would we re-envision it? And one of the things that Chris was really excited about was actually taking it in a different direction and really pulling out some of the feminine qualities of Leah and bringing them to Diablo.
Back in the day, I don't know that we ever wrote this down, but it's always been one of my favorite hooks, is that Diablo and his brothers, or any of these prime demons, they have to manifest in the physical world through a host. And given the fact that they all have very different kind of thematic kits, for instance, Diablo is the Lord of Terror, what he does when he possesses you is that he reaches deep and pulls out your darkest nightmares. And I had always surmised that in Diablo 1, we had this big hulking red brute. I always imagined that the person Diablo possessed to achieve that form was King Leoric's youngest son, Albrecht. And I always imagined that that was Albrecht's ultimate vision of what would scare him. And in Diablo 2, obviously the villain of Diablo evolved. Now he's got a tail and he's a little more Godzilla-like. So how interesting this time around, where Diablo is manifest again through the body of his mortal heir, that it would be female.
We really looked at the design, and there was a lot of insecurity about that in terms of like, well, could we pull it off? And would it potentially take away from some of the shape and viscera?
Talking to the dev team, like, yeah, what do you guys think about making Diablo a chick? I think a couple people stormed out of the room. It was not pretty. But over time, we just started drawing it out, and slowly but surely these designs started to come forward. Like, this is actually kind of compelling. It isn't quite as crazy as it sounds. And we wound up with what I think is a fantastic new design for the character that still sings to all the classic Diablo motifs, the big back spikes and the ram horns and such. But I love this new incarnation.
We embraced the idea that Diablo would be a female, and it was really exciting because it was a totally different direction for the IP. and felt like we pulled it off, and I hope that the audience sees that, you know, and it's subtle, you know, when she comes out, she still has a lot of the things that we relate to, the horns, you know, she's got the fire coming out of her mouth, but when you watch her walk, there's just a subtle grace about it, right, and there's just a little bit of hourglass to her silhouette that I think that if people are really paying attention, they'll catch on to it.
In the Diablo storyline, about 20 years have passed between the current game and its predecessor. This gave designers a rare opportunity to dig out the story of Leah, a brand new character in the franchise. To learn more about her background and the role she plays in Diablo III, let's meet some of the folks who brought her to life.
Leah represents innocence. Leah represents hope. She's smart, she's resourceful, she has powers of her own. She represents everything that humanity can be.
We wanted Leah to be someone that you would imprint on, you know, that you would enjoy coming back and talking to. She's someone you care about.
What happens to her in Diablo III sort of represents the ultimate tragedy and what's going to happen to everybody if you, the player, doesn't stop it.
I remember as we were developing the initial beats of Diablo III, one of the designers had this idea for an NPC. It was this girl that you would meet out in the middle of the woods, and she had this bow and seemed pretty cool, and there was some suggestion that she might have been the daughter of the Wanderer from Diablo II. We had created the character of the Dark Wanderer, who was supposedly the hero from Diablo I that had defeated Diablo the first time, and had, in an exorcist kind of way, taken Diablo's spirit into himself. So the subplot of Diablo II was that this Wanderer now, with Diablo's spirit within him, would head to the east, always east, to exorcise this demon from his soul.
We travel together, east, always, into the east.
Her mother was the witch Adria. Adria was a character that occurred in Diablo I. I think we look at her as this woman who is obsessed with the occult, with arcanum, you know, with chasing, you know, mysteries and magical powers over the course of her life.
She meets with the Dark Wanderer and falls in love with him, and at this point he has been corrupted by Diablo, and she bears his child, and this child is Leah.
It was clear that she was not fit to be a mother, and potentially she had her own dark mission, such that Adria gave up Leah for adoption. Ultimately, it was Cain, one of the few survivors of the original tragedy of Tristram. Cain recognized that this baby is very special, kept her safe, you know, for the past 20 years.
He potentially knows that evil is lurking within her, but because he carries so much guilt from the past games, you know, trying to help people understand that the sky is falling and not really taking action, that he felt that he needed to take her on and raise her the right way. But on the other end, he's like, you know, if this girl, you know, is so much looks sideways, it would be my job to actually take her out.
The character of Leah was raised by Cain. And since she was a little girl, he's been roaming around the map doing his research.
Looking for pieces of this thing called the prophecy of the end days. He's trying to piece it together and interpret it to figure out what he can do to stop the end times from coming. What can mankind do when the forces of hell show up to defeat them?
All that while, he's teaching Leah to be his apprentice.
He would have been constantly talking to her about these types of things, you know. At the end of days, angels and demons, you know, will fight on the land of man. And this being this little girl and not really having seen these things, this all kind of turns into this, oh, you're just crazy, I love you, but, you know, it's okay.
And she doesn't believe, because she hasn't lived through the events of Diablo 1 and 2, right? She's never really seen an angel or a demon. So she doesn't really believe in all his wacky theories.
But when she closes her eyes, she's tormented by these visions, right? And are these visions real, or are they just, you know, the kooky, you know, words from her uncle, and they're starting to merge, right? You know, the vision starts to become reality.
Leah, are you all right, my girl?
It was nothing, Uncle.
You know, over time, she is learning all these skills. And at some point in Diablo 3, we really come to a point where she really must step up and be the successor. even though she doesn't believe as he did. Has she seen enough to begin to believe that what he saw coming was true, and that she needs to kind of respond to her own hero's call?
I never believed all your crazy tales. The work you never finished.
She realizes that, no, there are some truths here, and she needs to make a decision on whether or not she's going to step in and pick up these writings and sort of be this new Cain for us.
I will finish it, Uncle. I will carry on for you.
Tyrael, as a mortal now, begins to rely on Leah as that Deckard Cain role. Together they help pretty much uncover Diablo's maneuverings and what he's been planning under the surface of all of this all along.
Even in the heart of heaven, angels can still feel fear.
And in trying to solve the riddle of how does Diablo come back yet again, we kind of had the idea is, well, maybe he comes back this time through his mortal offspring.
All the way back to the Great Exile, that this has all been Diablo's plan. At a certain point, he discovered the idea of the Prime, the idea that all the evils could become one and become exponentially more powerful than they'd ever been before. And that essentially, the last 300 or so years has been his plan to off all the other evils.
And now, for the first time, all the essences of these 7 prime evils now go into Leah. She turns into Diablo and becomes the one prime evil.
It fits with a lot of the stories that were told in the original Diablo and Diablo II, where we see really precious characters succumb to this kind of corruption and madness and evil. And so this was an opportunity for us to take a character that the player got to directly interact with, and hopefully that the player really likes, and see that exact thing happen to her. It was just too evil for us to resist.
To see her father, Diablo, take her over and turn her into a demon lord is the greatest tragedy we could think.
I certainly think she's tragic. It's tragic what happens to her. But I think the truth of Leah is that she is innately heroic. You know, she's a good person. But this evil was, rooted at a genetic level. And the turn that her life takes was inevitable to some great degree. When ultimately her turn comes, it feels terrible. We want you to feel like you've been socked in the gut, like, oh, anyone but her. Her spirit's still out there somewhere, right? There's a good girl there that deserves to be saved and brought back from the abyss. So while we don't have any clue yet, what subsequent chapters will be, a couple clues, I would bet that we would chase that down because it feels right from a story level and it feels right from a character level.
Making a game always comes with its own unique set of challenges. To give you a look into the process of building Diablo III from the ground up, we're going to talk with some of the developers who have guided this project from start to finish.
The game is put together painstakingly.
The basic process generally happens like this.
It starts with the, basically breath of an idea.
We'll have, the through line of what the story's supposed to be and the main points we have to hit.
What we do then is we go back and we brainstorm, we try to come up with, how will this affect the world? What would be a cool world to put this story into?
And that's, again, a collaborative effort that really goes all across the entire board, where the designers and the artists get together and do that.
We try to, whenever we can, break that out of just being a design-driven process. It's better when it's driven by the whole team.
Engineering, art, and design are all working together from the beginning. When people have these great ideas, they can kind of come out of nowhere.
Every voice matters. We've brought in the most talented people in the world. It'd be ridiculous to not take advantage of all that.
We define as little as possible, but enough so that it can be a branching off point.
Once we have that sort of solidified, then we usually go into more of a concepting phase.
They will tell us what they need to see. We put it on paper, and then we go from there. And they will make it happen.
Sort of riff off the ideas a little bit, we say, what does it need to do from a story point of view? What does it need to do from a game point of view?
It's not just going to be the concept guys, you know, generating the idea, and it's this waterfall flow of you do this, then I'll do this, then you do that.
Collaboration between the teams is a really huge component.
As we progress through and kind of advance our process for how we make the game, we've started to lean on groups called strike teams.
We got designers and programmers and artists together in the same room and said, okay, go nuts.
At that point, it's very equal. It's design, tech art, programming, throwing concepts out onto the table.
Just like we feed off each other. It's a great relationship.
And all that stuff kind of has come together pretty well because of that little group that is able to sort of like move and do whatever that they need to do.
Whereas before, you'd have to pass something off. Design would create a design, and then an exterior artist would create that, and then on to an animator or someone else for effects.
They all came together as one unit in this little strike team to create what you see in the game.
And when that team feels that they have something good, they put it back in front of the team as a whole, and they get more feedback.
After that, it's a matter of just executing, and then it's just back and forth. You know, we make some graphics. We then like code up the skills, we send it back to design, they play it a little bit, we have some comments, oh, maybe this didn't work, maybe this did. We tweak it a little, and then it's just iteration from there.
Through a lot of those sort of iterations, we get oftentimes to the point where we feel like, you know what, this is really doing the best service to the game itself. Like, this is the stuff that really works the best for it.
We refine through playing, we refine through putting our hands into the game, playing around with it, and seeing how it feels.
Even when we iterate, we bring in different departments, we do play tests, and people give feedback, and it's sort of like, all right, this works, this doesn't work.
We want to have that collaboration where it's like, oh, you had a great idea for that. Well, what if we do this? And you plus it. Everybody pluses it, you know, and ultimately, you know, you end up in a far better spot.
It's a very iterative back and forth process. It's time consuming, but it gives us very high quality results, which is what we're looking for.
That's all the nuts and bolts that goes on behind the scenes to really make the game run.
Sanctuary is an immense world with a history that stretches back thousands of years. As you can imagine, giving this entire realm new life in Diablo III was a monumental task for the game's developers. To shed some light on how they made it happen, let's chat with Diablo III's talented designers.
Storytelling was a really interesting challenge for us. You know, we set out from the beginning to say that we wanted to do more story. We wanted to have a stronger RPG element to the action RPG genre. And what we found was that the just general tone of the game didn't lend itself to that well.
Diablo III as an action game is a very, very fast-paced one. The player's natural instinct is to click on anything that moves or anything that doesn't move, anything at all, until it either explodes in blood or treasure.
You know, the basic gist of what we do is we take a story and we have to figure out the most concise, stripped-down way of giving the story to the player, because Diablo's a very fast-paced game. People don't really want to stop and hear a lot of story, hear a lot of dialogue.
From moment to moment, there are different aspects of the story that we're trying to portray for the player. There are different themes or different characters that we want to show off, different plot points.
Getting across, you know, your directions, you know, just your plain information about what you need to do in your quest. So all that needs to come across in as few words as possible.
You never want to fight against players' natural instincts. You always want to embrace them and try to find some methodology where you can give them more depth without taking away anything that they find fun about the game, which is that relentless click cycle that is Diablo gameplay that makes it fun.
All the mechanisms that we thought we could rely on, that many of the people on our team who had a lot of experience making RPGs thought that they could lean back on, we found they didn't work.
So it's hard to really get into a character like Leah using traditional methods, which is like having conversations with her, reading about her. And so what we've really tried to do then is use kind of action storytelling techniques.
Like conversations on the go, where people will talk to you and will explain things, but they'll do it as you walk through the world. You will chat with your friends, your followers, and quest givers as you go. And doing that has allowed people to experience the story without slowing down their natural instincts.
Magda knows where the next piece is. You must go and help our friend retrieve the sword piece.
You go through the world and you click on lots of monsters, you get lots of loot, and you want to keep doing it. You don't want to stop and hear what Joe Barkeep has to say about the local life.
We try to tell the story of the game through something happening. So instead of this guy talking to you about something, you'll just encounter him and you'll fight him. and somehow we'll reveal what is happening during that fight. We'll give you bits of information.
Characters that we put in the world with you who will comment on things, so we can have just as much story, but be able to deliver it in a way that players can hear it while they're not breaking kind of the flow of what they want to do.
Let's have Leah be involved in this thing. Let's bring her along for the ride and have her do something during your experience.
I still can't fully control it.
A lot of the story also is about kind of the relationship between you and her. And basically through that relationship, you can find out more about this character who's really central to our story.
We leaned on those things as our primary storytelling mechanisms, things that can occur while the action is going on.
We don't want to stop the players. We want them to basically to be able to experience the story kind of at their own pace.
Your mother's secrets are here.
People said she was a witch, but I never believed it.
And then we'll boil it down a little bit more. We'll come up with cool events that have their own little story within that big story.
And they are one-shot things where you'll, maybe run across a beleaguered farmer whose farm has been taken over by demons, and he wants you to clear out his farm.
People you run into in the wild that just have, something to say to you or something to sell to you. We put all that kind of stuff in, or interesting monsters that may have their own little story.
I will savor, tearing the flesh from your bones.
These are like ways of kind of fleshing out the world and making it feel like it's not just a whole bunch of just random creatures attacking you. It feels really nice. It feels like there's a little bit of rhyme or reason to what's going on in the world.
Keep your distance from it. This burden is mine to bear.
And then we still lean on things that you'd see in a normal role-playing game. There's lots of characters to talk to in town.
Extra conversations with NPCs to get more information about what's going on in the world.
Or just the area itself that you go into will tell a story.
We can support that a lot with the art, to where we're not telling a story, you're kind of surrounded by it in the environment.
We try to support story with art constantly.
You just run into an area, you see a bunch of bodies strewn around, there's a bunch of damage. Obviously something took place here.
My lord, the prisoner is ready, as you requested.
We have the concept of lore books. Lore books are things that you can find in the world that give little tidbits of history, quotes from famous characters.
My name is Latdanan, and I'm cursed. Once the captain of King Leoric's army.
You don't need to do them, but if you're really interested in story, and there's a good percentage of people who are, then they'll find that there's all these layers of depth in the story that they can dive into if they're really interested.
We explore a lot more of the world. It's not just that we see more areas and new areas. We also have a lot more depth in the world. That sort of depth, I think we open a lot of doors for people who are interested to learn more about Sanctuary and its denizens, about the other cultures.
There's something that's really important to the storyline. We will make sure it's conveyed to you in different ways. A person on the street might kind of echo a part of that story. You might get a lore book that also says the same thing.
As well, we, I think, ask some questions that are interesting that we don't even answer in the game. So we leave people with this curiosity to explore more of the world.
The implementation is kind of like putting together a big puzzle. So it's really kind of figuring out how to make these pieces work, and when you could figure out a way to do it in a situation where it feels like there's just no possible way to do it, just is really satisfying.
So I think we've succeeded pretty well here. I think we can do even better in the future, and we look forward to telling more and more interesting stories in Diablo.
What we tried to provide in D3 was like that awesome random experience, the ultimate replayability. This thing, you can go on and on forever. And how we did that was, for the dungeons, they're essentially like you had in D2. There's tons of random rolls of these things. We created lots and lots of rooms and encounters and things for you to play through. And these things will roll randomly. Every time you play, you're going to get a different dungeon experience no matter where you go.
Building dungeons in D3 has got to be one of the most challenging things.
You have to make the dungeon out of pieces. It's almost like constructing it out of smaller components.
Every room has got to be able to seamlessly connect to another room. Not only that, but you've got to be able to make something that's very cool looking, very interesting looking, but also something that's not too unique.
It's been very challenging to put in little set pieces like in dungeons if we're going to have dungeon stuff happen, or really minor things happen in dungeons because of the randomness of it. And within that we might have a little story element, but because it's random we can't have that story element connected to any other thing in the game. We figured out how to make little self-contained little story events, as we call them.
The environments themselves, the exterior zones, are all handmade.
Whenever we're building an environment, we need to know the basic goal, you know, of what the player is going to do there.
Rather than having them be randomized like they were in Diablo 2, we've made the outside of the area is all handmade so that we can have choke points and points of interest and areas for little scenes to play out, or ways to tie the area art into the storytelling so that we can make it as much of a character as any characters you actually meet in the game.
What we tried to do was create a world that you felt like this was a real place, and you're visiting Sanctuary. When you're running around, this is like, I understand where I am and what I'm doing.
Likewise, we've increased the amount of randomness in it so that we can still have that real Diablo feel by having large portions of the interior of those zones completely switch out.
We set aside spots in the zone that can be random, usually saving big events or some story plots for those areas.
So wherever you go, even though it's the same edges, all the stuff that happens in the middle is all random. You could play this thing like, you know, hundreds, thousands of times, and you're always going to get a different cool experience. There's so much randomness everywhere in the game. I think it takes that like D2 experience and, you know, multiplies it.
It was very important early on to say, you know what, let's make a game that has all the great things from D2. It feels moody and it feels scary and it is frightening.
Diablo is such a fast-paced game that we have to constantly provide new experiences and changing the mood.
The top priority is gameplay first, right? But one of the great things about working here at Blizzard, and I think especially, is the creative freedom that you have as an artist and our team has.
One of our early goals was to make sure that we created an inviting world, and in a lot of ways I'm very, very happy with what we've come up with. I think we've struck a very nice balance between trying to find a way where the game is beautiful, it looks great, and yet it is still very moody.
Wherever we can, we try to make sure that there are ups and downs in the lighting and the mood.
The idea is to create sort of a roller coaster ride.
And one of the ways that we could do that was by varying the color. When you add a lot of color, you can really evoke a lot of mood, but it also changes the pace so that you're not always in the same thing all the time, and it keeps it interesting.
But it does change within the game itself, meaning there's areas where we take it down a little bit, there's areas where we pop it up a little bit again.
When I first started working on the project, we tried to go for dark in the sense that we make everything very gritty and dirty.
There's oftentimes a misconception where people feel like, well, if you want a moody game, you just, you desaturate, you make it more gray or more brown.
We don't have to be colorful everywhere. We can control the color. We can still have dark areas, but we can make use of the color to create mood and feeling.
So if you walk into a certain dungeon and it's very red, you're automatically going to feel like, uh-oh, hey, this has a sinister feeling to it.
And our hope is that when you play the game, that you will fall in love with it. You will fall in love with not just the game itself, the look, the feel, and then ultimately how it made you feel.
Epic hero classes are a bold new addition to Diablo III. Expanding depth and scope of these heroes was a big goal for the game's designers. Let's find out more about what you can expect from these exciting new classes.
I really am happy with the classes and how they turned out. I feel really proud of the diversity of characters that we got.
The way we come about our classes, it depends on the class itself. We wanted 5 different classes that complemented each other well.
So we never said every class has to be a new class or every class has to be a returning class. We literally looked at them class by class and made a decision.
And the characters we created for this game really allowed us to look at different areas in the game geographically to give us a wider range of stories and backstories to tell different things about the world.
The general feeling of each of the characters, we've really tried to push them apart, make each one really, really unique. And so we put a lot of emphasis on just the visual read of each of the characters.
You don't just worry about it being really cool in and of itself, which it has to be, but you're also trying to make sure that it fulfills a certain fantasy for a player where they can say, that's the class I want to be. But then you also have to consider what the previous classes were. How does this really stand apart from everything else?
We brought a couple classes back. We've taken new twists on sort of old classes as well.
We felt in a lot of instances that, using the Necromancer as an example, we didn't feel there was anything we could bring to the Necromancer that we hadn't done great in Diablo II.
And that was, if we had one dictate, that would be it. It was that we didn't want to bring anyone back verbatim. If we were going to bring them back, we had to introduce new mechanics or somehow vastly improve the character.
When we did bring back the Barbarian was some character that we all liked and felt that could have been done better.
He was really the first class we wanted to do, primarily because he was familiar. That's the one we actually could do the most with, that we felt was not very well explored, that we could give these super powerful, high strength, almost Hulk-like moves to.
We put a lot of twists on him. We took many of the favorite skills that people had, like Whirlwind, and made them better. Plus, we took a lot of new skills and sort of explored those and found that twist in the Barbarian that makes him this earth-shattering, rage-filled warrior that fulfills all those fantasies that people have when they play a Barbarian.
The actual first skill we added to the Barbarian was Seismic Slam. He just takes his axe and he hits the ground and he creates an earthquake in front of him. Everybody understood what the Barbarian was after that.
This guy just carries this giant, this giant axe. He's super strong. He can knock you out in one blow. From an art standpoint, we try to support all that stuff with kind of a visual language. And if you look for it, you can look at the Barbarian and you'll see he's all squares, very blocky shapes. From material standpoint, he's all leathers and furs and metals.
The Barbarian is much older now than he was in Diablo II, and his homeland was destroyed during the events of Diablo II and Lord of Destruction.
The world was destroyed for him. Ultimately, his people, his beliefs, and everything are gone. But he's still around, and now he has nothing.
And then he's trying to find some purpose in his life when the game begins. And when he sees that meteor streak across the sky and hit in Tristram, he knows that he's found that moment he's looking for. And really what he wants to find is that epic death that every barbarian craves.
A foe worthy of my blade.
Our second class that we did was the Wizard.
You dare to bring the wand of life into my tomb?
The world of Sanctuary has lots of different types of magic users in it. While the sorcerers and necromancers are very well known, the wizards of Chaldeum are probably equally powerful.
And the wizard was one where we said, well, we know we need the glass cannon, mage type character. But what we didn't want to do was make an elementalist. We didn't want to make somebody who just did fire, lightning, and cold. That seemed very limiting.
You can tell that we took some of the classic sorcerer spells, things that we felt were just the best part of playing a magical class in Diablo, and we preserve those. Teleport is a big one.
She's also about time manipulation, and she's also about arcane magic.
We liked this idea of like old school role-playing game character, or the idea of just a pure wizard, somebody who can conjure things out of thin air.
She's I think the fantasy is to be a glass cannon. And that's a difficult fantasy to deliver on because players want to feel like a glass cannon where I can do lots of damage, but I can't take much damage, but I have a lot of tools to avoid damage.
I think people saw the wizard and went, well, that's just the sorceress. But when they actually see all the abilities that we've put on her, they're going to find that she's a lot different than the sorceress.
Likewise with the Witch Doctor, for example, we wanted to have a pet class like the Necromancer was in Diablo II, but we wanted to have some major twists on it. So both the Witch Doctor-y shamanistic background, the little undead twists by the fact that, he's bringing all these sort of voodoo animals back to life to make them fight for him and so on. That was a really cool twist that we had to a pet class.
Witch Doctor's cool.
We were really attracted to the idea of the Witch Doctor because it was an archetype we hadn't seen.
He really took on a life of its own. Once we threw out the name Witch Doctor, that one really invoked a lot of imagery in people's minds.
Conjures up all these great ideas of, maybe it's a little bit African influence, maybe it's a little bit South American influence.
And just one by one, we started translating every aesthetic vibe into a skill.
I remember the first time I even saw the concepts for Zombie Wall, it was just like, okay, all the other classes suck now. We have to go and redo them because the Witch Doctor's so good.
We even went further and was like, what if it was a tower of zombies? Like zombies climb on top of each other and then, fall down on top of you.
I think that it's very compelling and interesting and different, but still fills that same niche that players really want in an action-packed role-playing game like this.
So that gets us into kind of our choice of the monk.
Are you heading to Alcarnus?
And the monk was somewhat contentious because we didn't have our big kind of armored shield-wielding character. But again, that was kind of what was appealing to us, was we'd already done with the barbarian and the wizard some more standard classes, so we really wanted to explore the idea of some non-standard.
And we were thinking, well, the witch doctor has a dark tone to him. I think we need a light tone character to balance them out.
With the monks, we've given a brand new culture to the world. We've shown them Ivgarad and what these monastic holy warriors can do, and it's this cool mix of, you know, Rasputin meets Shaolin that these guys bring to the world.
He serves the 1,001 gods of his religion. He alone, kind of because he's this perfect warrior, he can do whatever it takes, whatever the gods need.
The monk, for a lot of people, they were like, wow, what's a monk look like?
The monk is very round shapes and has a lot of peaceful shapes, you know, circles and spirals.
Like Eastern Kung Fu style monk with elemental, like the fantastical takes that you see in media sometimes. You know, like if I do a kick, you actually get like a swirling tornado of fire coming out.
And then the final class we did was the Demon Hunter, and the Demon Hunter originally was supposed to be a ranger.
We knew we needed a ranged attacker. In Diablo II, there was the Amazon, and the Amazon as a ranged attacker was, you know, pretty big favorite. And we wanted to make sure that we captured some elements of the Amazon class in our Demon Hunter, but we also wanted to put our own spin to take her up a level.
We also wanted to be a little bit more on the brooding and dark side and a little bit on the scary side. A lot of medieval armor pieces, darker colors, reds, browns.
And so we kind of changed the kit to Demon Hunter to get the idea, one, to get the tone right. You know, Ranger feels kind of high fantasy, and that's not necessarily Diablo, but Demon Hunter, well, what could be more Diablo than a person who hunts demons?
The Demon Hunters are this almost Ninja Clan-like group of warriors who will gather people from all over the world, anyone who's been suffered by demons. If they see some spark of life or fight in them, they will take them and train them and send them out to be people who will destroy demons and stop at nothing, be even as relentless or more relentless than the demons themselves.
From an attitude standpoint, you know, it's an angry character.
The Demon Hunter's story is, we wanted to be somewhat tragic and grim, to offer some really harsh motivation for the character to just be a vengeful spirit. The Demon Hunter has come here of her own accord, looking for essentially vengeance, and with very good reason.
To stand shoulder to shoulder with Diablo III's heroes, the game designer set out to create some of the most legendary enemies and allies in the franchise's history. Here's a glimpse at how this cast of monsters and secondary characters was created.
So a lot of the times when we decide to carry a feature forward, it's always out of looking at what was there before. And sometimes we look at it and say, hey, that was great, we're just going to carry it forward.
And the followers are sort of a much more advanced version of the hirelings or mercenaries from Diablo II.
One of the things we wanted to do to really set them apart from the hirelings was give them personalities. They're not just cookie-cutter hirelings anymore.
And now they're literally characters who are inspired by you or who feel that there's something to gain by being with you, so they have a lot more depth than just a hired hand.
There's a lot of work this has gone into making them part of the story, giving them context within the world. They're more real NPCs, I guess, in Diablo III. And I think you get attached to them in ways that you never really could in Diablo II.
Take heed, traveler. Cultists guard these desert roads, and they will slay any who pass.
They are welcome to try. I have come here to kill them.
Then you must not go alone. I shall accompany you.
Basically, they're another tool that we have to bring story into the game. They have their own feelings about the world and feelings about you.
They're different from one another. We have 3 different followers. Each of them offers you something different.
We have Cormac, the Templar. He's a member of an order who wants to stop the demons from invading the world. We have Lyndon, the scoundrel, this underhanded, crossbow-wielding guy. He is a shameless ladies' man. He'll be flirting with everybody, from the female characters to Leah to townswomen. And lastly, we have the Enchantress. She's a mysterious character who's speaks of this enigmatic prophet and her sisters.
Followers are yet another way that you can sort of customize things in the game. So you can choose different skills for your follower to help you out.
They're there to help you diversify your build at the time when your character is simplest.
The followers are great at sort of being an adjunct to the build of the player character's class. So whatever skills you take, however you choose to play, you can find some variation of a follower that'll help you with that.
The Scoundrel, for example, a ranged character, good if you want magic find bonuses. And also, if you're a barbarian, you might want someone shooting arrows over your shoulder to help you out.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't take the Templar. The Templar can be spec'd to heal you. You know, he can come up there and melee, but he can also increase your resistances and give you other buffs like that.
So they're kind of a diet party member, you know, which is cool, but you can customize them so you can tune them up to help augment your playstyle, like another set of skills.
They can all be respec'd easily and cheaply, so you can format these people into any form you want.
What I like the best about them is that they give color commentary to the world. They make the world feel more alive.
We've always wanted to give them more life in Diablo 3, make them part of the story.
The Chancellor kept it safe for many years, and nevertheless.
I think the most important thing that tech-wise that we've done for the followers is a bunch of systems to have them have conversations with you, like when, you know, during downtime or during when you're walking to a quest or even when you're in town, they talk to each other.
They have a lot of things to say about what the world is, you know, what's going on in the world, what the world is like to them. So they have each have a unique viewpoint.
When virtue tarries, evil smiles.
And I think that some people will take them just for their personalities alone. It may not matter so much what their powers are. They just may enjoy spending time with the Scoundrel and hearing his snide, smart-ass comments to pretty much everyone you meet.
You shouldn't waste time chasing women.
Waste? Time is scarcely better spent.
You're talking back and forth with the follower. They're telling you a little bit of history about the area. If there's danger, they're going to tell you. If things are a little bit comedic, they'll throw in a one-liner. And it just makes the world more colorful.
How did you know about the ambush?
I am an enchantress. The ways of magic and illusion are familiar to me.
We can have this relationship grow between the player and the follower. So over the course of your adventures with them, they'll reveal aspects of their character, they will reveal secrets about themselves, and also they'll become your most stalwart allies.
When we place monsters, we like to think about what kinds of skills we've given the player. Ultimately, Diablo is about finding new and interesting ways to beat the candy out of monsters.
Because it feels so good to slay huge groups of monsters and get fantastic rewards as a result of that.
So that's where we hit on these ideas of building monsters in a specific way so that we could behead them, so that we could dismember them, or they could have their skin ripped off and their guts spilled out on the floor. And that was the thing that we were charged with early on, was make this game more visceral than Diablo 2. The goal of a monster is to make them different than every other monster.
Someone once told me, does that character look cool enough that you want a sculpture of that sitting on your desk? Okay, if so, you're probably on the right track.
I feel like we've got an enormous amount of depth and variety in visual look, in play styles, in mechanics, and I think that the mechanics that we designed on both sides interlock well.
It's an engineering challenge to try to make all the monsters subtly different from one another and really interesting for the player.
So based on each skill set for each class, that presents us with a lot of different strengths and weaknesses. We have to think about what kind of person is going to be rolling into this group of monsters? What skills are they going to have? What equipment are they going to have? We try to make them as flexible as possible, but when you see a group of monsters, you should have an idea of what you're going to do.
Part of the look of the whole overall package of the monster is the way that they act. I think with a game that's concentrated on second-to-second combat, I think that's where you kind of get your gain in the AI, is the subtle distinctions of the combat.
There's been some interesting stuff with the creatures and the size of them.
It was a combination of what did we like about Diablo. Of course, we love the Fallen, and you got to have skeletons. But then what's going to be new and have new kinds of impact? With that, we wanted to focus on some things that we hadn't done. And in a lot of cases, those were large, crazy creatures.
I think one of the more interesting ones was this character. It's the brick house.
He's this big dude who kind of summons in the middle of combat.
Like the first place that you see this guy is the keep, and the keep has like these doors that are these little tiny doors. Hey, I'm gonna run back through that door. That guy's not coming after me. The door's like this big, and then he just like runs up to the door and boom, he just blows the whole doorway out. And then he just keeps going right on through and he comes after you.
That was one of those things that I think was really neat, was getting the characters and the monsters to interact with each other more than to feel separate. These monsters show up on screen and they're only alive for maybe 10 10 seconds before you've killed them. But in those 10 seconds, they have to exhibit some sort of interesting behavior that makes you want to come back and fight more and more and more of them.
Each successive Diablo game has been a leap forward in terms of art, story, programming, and game mechanics. Diablo III offers up a number of exciting features that will be both familiar and completely new to fans. Here are Diablo III's designers to tell you more about two of the game's most unique features, health globes and runes.
One of the challenges that the designers were faced with was making the rune system, which is an incredibly complicated system.
Skill runes change what your skills do. They like add bonuses to your skills, and they kind of change some of the focus. It's a really tough choice sometimes looking at what different runes do to your skills.
The runes were actually an idea we came up with a few years ago, that we were like, how can we inject more customizability into these powers?
We'd originally talked about ways in which the runes could be simple so that they could just give you small bonuses to stats.
Initially, we pitched the idea, well, maybe I'd find a rune that increases the damage of all my skills by 10%. And someone said, okay, well, what happens when I put that in teleport? And we're like,
What the designers really wanted was something that was completely crazy. It was nuts as far as we were concerned.
As we said, you know what? We're just going to design these runes to be different in every single skill. And if that means that we reinterpret what that skill means, great.
And that sort of open-endedness is a really big engineering challenge.
But once we started playing around with it and seeing how cool it was to actually totally change the functionality of a spell just by putting this thing in there, that thing really took off and became a larger focus of the game.
One of the things that we did was we wrote our own scripting language and gave it back to the designers so that they could do the freeform scripting that they needed to.
And it just results in a bunch of really cool different powers.
What I didn't realize is how much work we were signing ourselves up for at the time. And what was initially I thought was going to be like a 2 to 3 month feature wound up being probably a 2-year endeavor.
Just really fun. It's just another way of customizing your character. You know, the way I play my Demon Hunter is different than the way you played your Demon Hunter. And not only do I have skills to choose from, I have the runes to put into those rune slots, which are going to change my skills even more.
It's turned out to be a huge win for us. We get a very big variety of skills. It's amazing to see what they come up with. Their imaginations run wild, and the game's much better for it.
It's funny when you talk to people about Diablo II and they say, what did you love and what did you hate? And they're like, man, I hate potion spamming.
You'd collect a lot of potions, you'd save them up for the boss fights, and then whenever you're in trouble, you just constantly hit the key and try to recharge your health.
I hate that like the solution to every boss is to just hit the potion key over and over and over again.
We wanted to make it so that that wasn't a mechanic of the game anymore.
We tried several different health mechanics early on.
First, we tried what we called a potion dilution. That meant that every time you hit your health potion button, you'd get a debuff on you that would reduce the effectiveness of future health potions for a certain period of time. What we found is you just hit the button more.
We tried resting to restore your health, and then it just seemed like you were hiding in a corner all the time.
We took a page out of the FPS book. In an FPS, if you think about it, when I want to stop taking damage, I take cover. There's no notion of cover in Diablo.
And when we came up with health globes, it just really changed the whole kind of feel of the gameplay.
You have to fight, you have to be engaged in the game to try to get the health to drop.
So it's a really dynamic gameplay thing. And, you know, we put the cooldowns on potions, so it's very much moving away from the spammingness of potions. And it's just a dynamic way of giving health back to your character that really fits in with the action-oriented gameplay of Diablo.
And we put that in, and we haven't looked back ever since.
From voice acting to music, the sound team is responsible for crafting Diablo III's audio. Its use of live orchestras and haunting choirs has helped turn Sanctuary into a living, breathing, and utterly terrifying world. To discuss their work on Diablo III, here are some of the team's very own members.
When you go into a Diablo game, you need to feel it, and the sound is a huge part of how you perceive the game.
Diablo 3 is really exciting because we know that we're going to have the time to draw you in and take you on a journey.
The music never stops in Diablo. There are no pauses, there are no silences other than those that are absolutely intended.
Very raw, and it's assaulting, and it speaks of demonic things and subjects that are dark and ancient and old conflicts.
Mood of the game is very important from an audio standpoint. It's everything. It has to be in an environment that just feels lush and cool and dark and dirty and dank and smelly. It's got to stink. The audio has to smell bad. We have an incredible staff of composers, including Glenn Stafford, Derek Duke, and Russell Brower, and I'm doing a bit of it myself.
A composer is like a writer, like any other storyteller here at Blizzard. We create worlds and we add immersion to the experience of playing the game.
All of us composers here at Blizzard, we wear a lot of hats. We take our music and we mix it, we edit it, we master it. Ultimately, by the time it gets into the game, it's something that's more cohesive and sounds similar across the various composers and for the different elements of the game.
The story of D3 involves this massive clash of the heavens and the hells, and the sense that the music should become more ancient and primal and then also grand and exciting. These are the kind of thoughts we had as we began to fill our palette with colors that we would use for Diablo 3. At the core of it is still the original melody ideas and timbres from Diablo 1.
The challenges for the really hardcore fans, for us, there's already a very established mood and tone as far as the music goes.
Musically, Diablo 1, 2, and the expansion for Diablo 2 were all iconic and very original, and that's a tough thing to do in any art form. I don't know that any one of us would have played a 12-string guitar through a digital delay and had that be the opening moments of this world. But that's what composer Matt Ullman did, and it worked really well.
Sonically, it was interesting. It wasn't narrative. It was almost like a stream of consciousness, very much like you weren't necessarily aware of where it was going to go next or what was the next sort of musical element that was going to suddenly pop in.
The music for the original Diablo was so iconic that when we set about to announce our development of Diablo 3, we were able to use that musical signature as the very first inkling to our worldwide audience as to what we were making. The lights went down to black on the stage in Paris, France. The lights came up red. That revealed a guitarist standing there alone, holding a 12-string guitar, and he played the opening chords of Diablo. And in that moment, everyone knew exactly what we were up to.
The world premiere of Blizzard's newest game.
It was an amazing experience with, I believe, something like 11,000 people in the room. In recording the orchestral music for Diablo 3, one of the basic tenets we had was we want this game to sound completely different than World of Warcraft and StarCraft. What else could we do to make Diablo sound unique? And we decided it would be greater than the sum of the parts approach. A lot of little things we would change, like where we're recording it. What we're doing with Diablo is we're recording in an old-fashioned concert hall. This is a hall that was designed for live performance and not for studio recording. So it's a vast space. There's a lot of volume of air. It's our responsibility as musicians to move as much as possible to make this sound, epic and bold. If the most ancient form of music is for other people to hear in a live situation, then maybe it follows that the concert hall is the best environment to hear music that's supposed to be as timeless can be. Another change we made is that we recorded the choir in Europe for the simple reason of having singers that spoke with different accents and sing with different accents.
This is that thing where I want to be sure and hear the beginning of the note.
Okay.
So maybe let's just take it up a notch.
All the tenors on the G going up to the A flat.
Anytime you use human voice, you can reach people like no other instrument can. It's direct, it's to the point, it's the clearest form of storytelling. It's like direct injection into the nervous system. And then when you put 2, 3, 4, 90 voices into a space and you record them, you're drawing analogies with the world of Sanctuary and whole cultures. It's subtle, but it's a microcosm of the story itself. You can describe that in 20 or 30 words, but a musical phrase performed just the right way can completely convey that in just a few notes and a few seconds. It literally can give you chills, and that's the wonderful power of music.
I like every game that I work on to have its own signature sound, and really the only way to do that is to go out and create the material for that specific title. Unfortunately, Blizzard allows us to go out into the desert and light stuff on fire.
Safety first. Do not try this at home.
All right, what are we setting up for here, guys?
A little miniature bomb, if you will. I have a long history of experimentation with using gunpowder to create sounds. It's a very, very handy tool. Some of the inspiration originally for some of these methods came from cartoons, actually. Watching Wile E. Coyote lay a trail of gunpowder up to a pile of dynamite or some other flammable object and lighting it, and that's what we do. We do that very same thing.
Pickle hot? Pickle's hot.
All right, here we go. Heroes like fire, so do the people who work on the heroes. Make sounds for them. I want to get the ring of the tank, so when it blows, there's a nice little metal ring out. That's an interesting method that we've used over the years, and I'm still perfecting it, and occasionally it goes wrong and doesn't work out. But we're always rolling tape when it does happen, so something cool usually gets taken home.
Are you okay, dude?
I'm fine.
Let's go get some beer.
I've never actually completely blown myself up, because I am here, as you can see.
I think we'd try something different on the next one, yes.
Fire is just incredibly useful for skill sounds.
Wizard and Witch Doctor classes have a lot of projectiles that have fire. So you need the cast, the projectile traveling through the air, and then the impact, and then the residual flames and fire that it causes with the area of effect. So we need a lot of fire sounds to have enough material to work with to make all those sounds that we need for the game.
There was a big giant pile of trees and debris that we got some friends to collect for us for about a year, and it was about 30 feet in diameter, and we lit the whole thing on fire.
Fire will ensue.
Yes, after that.
And we will record it.
The sounds while it was burning were pretty cool, but the really cool thing was after it burned down to coals, we sprayed water on the coals and we got all this really incredible crackling and gurgling and all sorts of lava type sounds, which are really useful in the game. And that was a fun day. That stuff was really, really incredible.
That's good. Grazie.
Not just any angel. I was the Archangel of Justice. My fall awoke the vengeful dead, who were slain unjustly during Diablo's reign of terror. There was nothing I could do.
This is perhaps the biggest voice undertaking we've done at Blizzard so far. I think that StarCraft II had about 3,000 lines, but currently our estimate for Diablo III is anywhere from 13,000 to 16,000 lines. The easy part is identifying the voice. The hardest, more challenging part is identifying who the character is. Because for us, once we're in the recording studio, they do come to life and they are very real.
This is about as exciting as the time Uncle Deckard and I spent the summer in Bramwell. You're not very good at lifting the spirits of others, are you?
Does the soul stone shatter? Do the demon lords break free?
Diablo's essence was finally trapped in a soul stone and banished to the unfathomable abyss.
He has led the angels of the high heavens to victory against the forces of hell countless times.
Casting is probably 90% of the equation. As much as people might want to rush through it and just find their voice and get in the booth, the more time you spend brainstorming with the team to start with, to really hash out exactly what they want, to really dive into the kind of ethos of the character, the more time you spend doing that, and then the more time you spend looking under every stone, listening to hundreds of auditions, that really helps you solidify who your character is and what you want.
It is nothing compared to the Grand Maesters. It is named Akunesh, the Herald of Righteousness. A sharper blade was never forged.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of prompting from dear Andrea, our casting producer. She heard a voice that she liked, and I just sort of went to town on it. And, you know, with a bit of coaxing, it got more and more badass.
Preparing for Leah in large part was through interaction with the writers and our directors. For me, it always comes out of what's the story and what's the world of the story. That's the beautiful thing about games, is every world is different, and this world is very unique.
When I actually got cast as the wizard, it was quite exciting. I was like, ooh, I know that. I need more mana. So it just seemed like a natural fit. They said, you know, cocky wizard guy? Sure, I'll play that. Sounds good to me.
How is the Enchantress different from other roles that I play?
Well, the other roles that I play are usually, like, really down here.
And I really think that voiceover is like kids playing in a room together, because suddenly you're just there, you're having fun, you're letting your imaginations go, so nothing has to match anything. And I think what I love most about voiceover is suddenly, after all this work, all this talk, after all this searching for this actor, this voice, right in front of your eyes, boom, all of it comes together.
Tell me, what will we do once we have trapped Belial and Osmodan in the Soul Stone?
Don't worry. I will make sure no harm befalls your children.
He was never one to lead an army. Always in the shadows, much like his mentor, Mephisto.
You don't see that actor anymore. When you get it right, you really are tapping into something bigger, whereby you are channeling your male demon hunter, for example, and it's pretty exciting.
That is not a demon's way. They prefer to torture, to taste their victims' terror. Poison is far too civilized for them.
What's difficult with this game is that there are so many lines that we have to get through, and there are a lot of names to learn and pronunciations.
You two search for Belial while I hunt Magda.
Belial, Asmodan, Juriel, and Andariel, and the primevals, Mephisto, Baal, and Diablo.
Mephisto?
Mephisto?
Mephisto.
Say it.
Mephisto. Mephist. Oh.
Don't forget you're part of the deal, Cool. Give us the Soul Stone!
Creature sounds for me are one of the funnest things we get to do. I always tell people it's pretty amazing when you get to bring a grown man in and just play.
I see the motion here.
So when you have amazing monster actors like the ones we used for Diablo, the things they can do with their mouth and their vocal cords are phenomenal. There's not many actors who can do creature sounds and not blow their voices out. I've had actors come in and say, oh yeah, I can do monsters, no problem, and they really want to, and they have the enthusiasm for it, but within, no joke, 15 minutes their voice is blown out. So to find people who can have that ability to create with you and to sustain it's pretty amazing. I think having worked on World of Warcraft and StarCraft and now Diablo III, we are really upping the bar. You know, not only with the amount of dialogue, but the amount of storyline we're able to tell and the amount of context for our characters. I mean, none of our characters in any game I've worked in so far have these many lines. So with that, you do get to create a more well-rounded character. You do get to create more in-depth emotional responses, and you get to take your character to places that we don't usually get to do in our other games.
I hope you've enjoyed this look at the making of Diablo 3. Now it's time to explore Sanctuary yourself. I'll see you on BattleNet.